If you're a Flyers fan and you haven't been following Kevin on the website, you must do so. He has been killing it with great Flyers and hockey coverage. He's been doing a series on all the classic Flyers playoff series. You know, he goes all the way back to 74, 75, the Stanley Cup championships, looks back at all of them, the Edmonton series. So check out that series from Kevin Durso on our website, 973ESPN.com. He also has an article posted from yesterday about Alain Vigneault and how the goal hasn't changed. We will get into that. There's a lot of Flyer stuff to get into, actually. I had the GM, Chuck Fletcher, on about a week ago. I want to get Kevin's takeaways from my conversation with the Flyers GM. Plus, I definitely want to get into this Oscar Lindblom story, but check out all of his Flyers coverage on our website, 973ESPN.com. All right, Kevin Durso, 973ESPN.com, covers the Flyers. Kevin_Durso on Twitter. Now with us, talking a little hockey, the opportunity for the NHL to return. Where does that lie? And some Flyers stuff as he joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Kevin Durso, what's up, my man?
Not much. How's it going, Mike?
Everything is well. I know no hockey, but we are at least getting little nuggets of information. The NHL aiming to open their practice facilities for small group workouts in the mid to later portion of May. This is really one of the first, little bit of information that we've gotten from the NHL.
Yeah, it is. And, I mean, I wasn't surprised at all at the way that they phrased the update, talking about there's a lot of reports and speculation out there that are putting firm dates on things. You know, I'd heard May 15th was a date that was floating around to return for camps, and then they were talking about being able to start on June 1st or something about June 1st being a camp start date as well. Nothing's firm at this point. But to at least be able to come out and say that they're looking into a phase 2 of a transition that would bring players back out of self-quarantine, allow them to go into training facilities and start to work out is a step in the right direction to getting back on the ice, to getting any sense of where this goes, to play the games out wherever they have to go to do it. It was last week that they shot down the idea that they were going to play in strictly neutral sites like North Dakota or New Hampshire or Saskatoon and have to focus on NHL arenas. And Gary Bettman said the reason for that is strictly not necessarily the ice space, but having the back of house to be able to have locker room space and other training and other facilities within an arena that the NHL facilities have already that these other places do not. So they're going to look into NHL arenas that they feel they can play in, and it's just a matter of trying to get to this first step sometime hopefully in May, like they're saying they hope to do, and getting players back in their facilities to train and then taking the next step from there, which hopefully is narrowing down on the locations that work and figuring out the best way to arrange a schedule to finish out this season and get the playoffs in.
So the possibility is there then for this to return, but it doesn't sound the way that you're talking that they have the same opportunities that baseball has or the NBA has, which sounds much more optimistic. Like this Disney World thing that the NBA is out there with, that sounds like this could really work. They got hotels. They have plenty of basketball facilities on site. They have Disney and the ESPN as a broadcast partner that are right there. So the NHL doesn't seem to have a natural place to kind of get their thing off the ground. Is that one of the biggest hurdles?
It probably is, and I think the biggest reason for that is unlike the NBA or unlike Major League Baseball where you would have similar facility types, you know, you can there's a place where you can go where you might be able to find multiple baseball fields to play games, or buildings where you can easily construct multiple basketball courts to be able to have multiple games at one time. I don't know that that is as likely in the NHL because it's so hard to create the arena, the ice, and have it ready to go in NHL conditions the way it needs to be. And have multiple rinks in one location. I think what it would turn into is they're trying to narrow in on specific locations around the NHL where you would be able to put groups of teams and essentially use the same ice for 3 or 4 games in the same day, basically do it tournament style. And that sounds like a great idea, and I think that that has some merit to it because they have done it for major tournaments like World Juniors. So I don't think scheduling would be necessarily a major issue if you could figure out how to get the teams in one location. It's just going to be about how do you resolve the rest of the schedule because I mean, the Flyers had games left on their schedule that were against Western Conference teams. Would you really be bringing Western Conference teams in to play these games, or vice versa, have them going to play West teams? There's a lot of logistics to work out with it, and I think that that's why you're not really hearing anything in terms of gameplay. You're not really hearing anything about it until closer to July, just because of the fact that they've said they've been willing to push this back and basically play out this current season from as late as starting it in July and finishing it in October, having a very short off season and then coming back for next season starting in December. That's kind of the most that's the most reported timeline that we've seen. And again, they don't want us to speculate on anything. I would definitely tell people, be careful what you're reading in terms of getting excited when it comes to this, because don't really buy into anything firm until you hear it from the commissioner himself about it and the league actually putting an update out there. But there are ideas all over the place. They are talking on a pretty much daily basis at this point about scenarios, and hopefully they can come up with something. But a good first step is at least having an idea that players can get back to where they train and work out in small groups and get some form of workout started so they're at least ready to go whenever the league finds a solution that works.
Yeah, and Kevin, it sounds like a big issue for the NHL is travel. You know, you got the United States and Canada. There's a lot of teams in Canada, 5-6 teams up there, and the border is closed to non-essential businesses. So, and you got a lot of players who are in Europe that could be possibly stranded in those spots until who knows, right?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be another hurdle to get over here, and it's going to come down to the willingness for everybody to kind of be bringing this back as a collective, basically consider turning it into something that they're going to consider essential. Right now it is not essential, but in another month, is it something where you can feel like you can lift some of those restrictions and maybe allow these players to return to an area where they're all collected and gathered together as a team and start to get things back on the ground? There are players who are saying this isn't going to work. You know, Drew Doughty from the LA Kings has said he doesn't think players are going to want to do this. Philip Deneau from the Montreal Canadiens has said as much. And granted, the thing about those opinions on saying players aren't going to be willing to do this is that those are two players who are playing for teams that are out of the playoff picture and have not much left to play for. And maybe looking at these final few games is nothing more than a mere formality to them isn't really worth it. But ask anybody on a playoff team, any of the Flyers players who say they want to get back, and ask Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin if they want to have a chance to play too. They'll tell you absolutely they want to play because they're in the middle of a race. So I think when it comes down to it, the players want to be out there, especially the ones that have a shot to win, and and especially the ones who have a shot to even make the playoffs that aren't in the playoff picture either. They want to finish this out and they want to get their shot, but it's just going to come down to logistics and whatever the governments say about getting players back in one place.
Now, yeah, I mean, like LeBron James comes out today and he tweets that, hey, we all want to finish this season. Our team's ready to go. We're ready to go. It sounds like the NBA certainly, that the messaging there is that they intend to get back. And as you kind of hinted at with hockey, how late they would go, would they pick this season back up in, I don't know, August? Does that sound like something that would happen?
If they did that late, then it would require a change to the initial plan. I think July is as late as they'll go to do everything. So all the regular season games that are left on the table, plus the playoffs. If it gets later than that and they still want to try to finish it out, then you're looking at cutting out the rest of the regular season maybe and just taking it to the playoffs. Maybe you're looking at only a handful of regular season games and then an adjusted playoff schedule that would change maybe the first round or something like that. They'll have to cut it short if it goes any later than July, I would think.
All right. Kevin Durso covers the Flyers for us here at 97.3 ESPN.com. You wrote in your story that Commissioner Gary Bettman said the reason the NHL arenas are needed is because of the back house arena that they provide, meaning, the locker rooms, as you kind of talked about there. But so if they can't find this, mythical spot, I get like the NBA, the only option for them seems to be playing in empty home arenas. Is that what you feel?
That would even be tough to say because the fact I think they're trying to hone in on making sure that there's a location that everybody can go to where you can not guarantee safety, but where it feels like it's not as much of a hot spot. That's the idea. The idea was that there might be 4 or 5 neutral locations, but they're NHL facilities where they could play. So the talk was separating it by division and maybe putting one team from, one arena from the Metro in place where the Flyers would go and the Capitals and the Rangers and the Penguins would all go, and that's where they would play their games. and then there's another designated arena. Now, Gary Bettman said it doesn't have to be done by division. There's other ways they could do this, but that's kind of the goal, is to find maybe 4 or 5 places where you could basically send everybody in certain numbers of groups that they kind of call that place their home arena for the time being. It's definitely going to be without fans. That's no question about it at this point. It's definitely going to be without fans, and it's going to be strange to see for sure. But I think everybody understands it. My belief has been from the beginning that the longer that we went without sports in place, the more willing everybody, players, fans alike, are going to be willing to just see it on their televisions and have something to watch. So I think we're getting to that point, and especially if you're talking waiting until June or July to even get it up and running, they'll have been near 3 months without anything, and I think anybody would be desperate to see something on their TV that gives them a live event.
There was a time, Kevin, where I really thought that the NHL would be the first one to come back, that they would, I don't want to say try to put their players at risk at all, but just that, hey, we had an opportunity to kind of be the first one back and give people, and this is back when we felt we didn't have nearly as much information and we didn't realize what was going on. And when you heard that leagues were being on the pause button, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be this long. I think we're at like day 50 without playing a live televised, sporting event. And I thought, hey, the NHL, might get back, be the first one to be able to get back and, get their product out there before others. But it seems like they're almost the last one potentially to get back because of the back end issues that you talked about.
Yeah, and I mean, Gary Bettman said he's not focused on being the first here. If there's anything they're going to try to take advantage of to help give the sport more exposure, it's the idea that they have out there to try to move the NHL draft up now. It would have been actually now the best case scenario for it, or the one that they keep proposing, is to move it up to the early portion of June. Do it the way the NFL draft just happened. And basically the reasoning is the NFL draft got huge ratings and the NHL saw it. And now they possibly want to try to take advantage. There's a lot of pushback from GMs who are going to feel like it's not going to be able to be done the way that it needs to be. There's no way to determine a true draft order because the season hasn't finished. They would have a lottery once the regular season was over between the teams that didn't make the playoffs. And there's conditional picks that go into it where they're not able to determine what the conditions are because some of those are dependent on how far a team goes in the playoffs. There's no way to know these things until you finish the season. So that's why there's a lot of pushback. But I do think that there's an opportunity there to get some form of a live event out there. I know that I was very invested in the NFL draft because it was something that was on, that was happening in the moment. And I think the NHL would benefit from taking advantage of that opportunity because especially when I think you're past the point of trying to do anything the way the draft would have been done in person. So I think if you're going to have it online and do it virtually, you could try to work around this and have it as soon as possible. I certainly understand where the GMs are coming from, but I think there's an opportunity there to get something out there for fans, not just of hockey in general, but casual sports fans too, to have something to look forward to.
All right. Yesterday, you posted a story at 973ESPN.com. I encourage our listeners to check that out regarding Alain Vigneault and some of the things that he had to say, one of which was the goal hasn't changed. I mean, when he's saying that, it sounds like he is speaking in a way that suggests that he thinks the season is coming back and that once it does, that the goal is the same. What exactly is the goal now? Because I would imagine, Kevin, that their goals may have changed from when they started this season.
I would imagine that as well. His goal is basically from the beginning of the season, he laid it down that this was going to be one of the 16 teams in the playoffs. And quite honestly, without even touching the last 13 games that they had left on their schedule when the pause happened, I think they were on their way to doing that anyway. So I think that goal hasn't changed anyway, and it shouldn't change, and it's probably close to being accomplished no matter what. I think what you have to change now is the goals beyond that, which, maybe it was just going to be good enough in that first year with Alain Vigneault as head coach and a lot of new players to just do what kind of has happened in years past. You made the playoffs, you're there, and now the following seasons you'll want to make it again and continue to get better. I think now the goal is at least win a playoff series and get yourself into a further discussion as one of the top 8 teams in the league that's left playing at the end of the year, maybe even be one of the final 4 teams that's playing and be in a conference final. They were playing so well when this pause happened, and to just have it all come to a screeching halt, it's good to hear a coach say the goal hasn't changed. We want to go not just make the playoffs, We want to go far in the playoffs. We want to have a shot to win the Stanley Cup just like everybody else does. And, it may be too lofty to go and shoot for the Stanley Cup right away in the first year with him as the head and with this system in place and with a lot of players who have a lot of growing left to do. But it sets the groundwork for what's going to come in years to come. This team over the next 5 years could be one of the big noisemakers in the NHL because they have laid the groundwork with a solid defensive core. They've got the goaltender. They've got the forward depth up front. And a lot of it is young, and that's going to be key moving forward as they go through the years to come. But for this year, it's certainly not just about making the playoffs anymore. It's about getting in and actually making some noise, trying to at least win one series, maybe two.
Yeah, and, obviously we had Chuck Fletcher on. You wrote an article about that conversation, and, he said we didn't really it sounded like, look, we didn't have the expectations of what our team actually became right now, but now that it has shifted, and he gave a bunch of reasons why. What are some of the things that Vigneault had to say about why his team is kind of where they are right now, which, through October, you wrote about this, 5-5-1, Thanksgiving, 13-7-5. Since then, 28-14-2, including a 19-8-2 record since the start of 2020. And, Fletcher brought up about, I was a little surprised that, he really, I don't want to say surprised, but he talked about the defense and about how he thought that they were really the surprising part of the team.
Yeah, and I think that Alain Vigneault stressed that as well. He talked about the importance of continuing to improve during the season and having to get better as the year goes on, and that's what those records indicate. October wasn't the greatest. It wasn't poor either, but it was kind of right in the middle. And then around Thanksgiving, you had the signs that this was a team that at least was cracking the playoff picture, hanging around the bubble like everybody kind of thought they would. And then after that, they just started to turn a corner, hold for the road trip right around shortly after Christmas into the new year, where they won one game on that road trip out of 6. But after that, they really started to turn the corner and just become a team that nobody wanted to play, that never seemed out of a game, and just kept finding ways to win. And a lot, sometimes they were strange ways to win. I think the shootout game against Boston, or finding a way to win in overtime against a team like St. Louis over the course of the middle of January, or the games, the home and home against Columbus in February. Those are games that stand out. They kept rising to the occasion and overcoming any challenges that were thrown at them in terms of adversity in a game. Maybe they would give up a goal that would tie the game up. They'd come right back. They'd score another goal. Now they're back in front. They wouldn't give up the lead again. They were a type of team that kept learning from those little things. And that last year, that was a team that was just going to crumble with every bad bounce or every misfortune that they had. And this time they don't take it that way. This year they have put that behind them. They put it behind them quickly in games. They make the proper adjustments to find a way to win, and that's what the good teams do, and that's why they're where they are. It's because they stick to the game plan. They have definitely bought into the system that Alain Vigneault has presented, and it's made them a force in the NHL over the course of the last 2 months, or the last 2 months of gameplay at least.
And I wanted to kind of get your take, since Alain Vigneault spoke yesterday, and the article regarding him was regarding a lot of what he said. How much, when we had Fletcher on, he said we interviewed him one time, we interviewed one other guy, and I went and said, we got to hire that guy. I mean, so he seemed like he was sold on Vigneault after one conversation that he was the right guy. And now that you've seen the season, you've covered the Hackstall teams, how much has Vigneault made a difference?
He's been a huge difference, and I thought you had said it really well after the interview with Chuck Fletcher as well, that his quote about saying this guy's the leader of the ship, that says a lot. It says a lot about a guy who gets the trust of the players, and it says a lot about how they bought in. I always felt from the beginning of this season that we were going to learn about whether or not this team, if the problem was the players or if the problem was the coach. And it seems like there's no question about it now that it was a coaching change that was needed. They got an experienced coach who laid down the law and put a system in place and didn't really know for an answer. And the thing that I look back to in terms of that is in the preseason, they had played probably 3 or 4 games, and he cut half the team, made the decision we have to make cuts, and we need the regulars to play more often than they were to get them ready for this season, because what's going on so far is not good enough. And to do that in the middle of the preseason really said a lot. So he definitely runs this ship, no question about it. And he is definitely the leader. The way he runs everything And even down to the practices, they know what they're going to do before practice starts. There's no time over at the board to go over what the drill is the way other coaches would typically do it. So they just go about their business, and everything is fast paced, and it's turned them into a better team on the ice from a conditioning standpoint and from an execution standpoint as they've gone through, because of the fact that everything is so systematically done. So that all of that is Alain Vigneault, and credit to the assistants as well, to Michelle Therrien and Mike Gill, who joined the staff, Ian LaPerriere as well, who's been on the staff for a while. They've all kind of worked collectively to make this a system that works really well for this team. There's not really any particular weakness anymore as there was. Everything is at best or at worst, I should say, is at the middle of the pack in the league. And that's only after maybe a little bit of a slump in one area. So the penalty kill has generally been better, and the power play has generally been better throughout the year. There's moments where it's not, but generally been better, and everything else has been better. And the main goal, as Fletcher said, was to cut down on goals against. And I think that the system that Vigneault put in place has established this need for everyone to play two-way hockey, not just the defensive core, not just having the goalie play better, but the forwards have more of a responsibility as well to play in their own zone and create offense as a result. Everybody's bought into that as well. So that's what gets you the kind of results that they've had over the course of January and February, and gets you into the conversation as one of the hottest teams in the league down the stretch as they were when everything stopped in March.
Kevin Durso's with us at Kevin_Durso. Follow for his Flyers conversations and coverage on the website. I want to get this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, your story regarding Oscar Lindblom undergoing his final cancer treatments. Is there some possibility that we could see Lindblom back on the ice with this season being pushed back so far?
Probably not, just because I think from the beginning it was going to be clear that he wasn't going to be able to play this year at all, and I don't think that the delay in the season and the pause does anything for him. They've got to be careful about his health overall regardless, just because he is now one of these high-risk people who could, you don't want to put him in a situation where he even has a shot to get the virus of any kind, and how that could hinder his health. But regardless, it does kind of create a path for him to make a return at some point. The fact that in that story you're hearing things about how he continues to work out, he hasn't really lost that much weight, in comparison to everything. So he's still not staying active, which is important for him to have a shot to make a comeback at any point, let alone maybe as soon as next year. But he's always been this strong-willed person who's going to set his mind to finding a way to get back into this league. I have no doubt that he'll play at some point. I don't think it'll be this year. It might be tough to even see it being next year. The longer, I think that where the delay helps him is, let's say that they have to hold this season until July and they finish the current season in October, and the season doesn't start until December like some of the models are showing. If you got to wait until December for him to come back, it'll be a year after the diagnosis, and if he's cleared to play in some capacity and his strength is up to where he can play, you might be able to see him on the ice at some point during the next season if it's going to run from December to July of the following year, as opposed to a season that would run October to April. It's tough to say what his timeline would be, but as strong-willed as he is, I know that without question, he's determined to find a way to get back as soon as possible. And the fact that he has continued to work out over the course of this time and has had such good progress in terms of these treatments, it just says a lot about him as a person, and it's great to hear because he's one of the most well-liked guys in that locker room, so it's great to hear.
Sure is, and you can read more about that at 973ESPN.com. Kevin_Durso on Twitter, and of course, when hockey news happens, we'll have Kevin back, and check out his series on the Flyers playoff series over the year. They've been a lot of fun to read and look back. The most recent one, I say the most recent, which goes all the way back to the 70s, and of course the Flyers Stanley Cup 74 against the Bruins, that's posted. 75 against the Sabres, that is posted as well. And all of the recent playoff runs, Kevin's done a great job taking you back and looking at them on our website, 973ESPN.com. All right, man. Good work, bud.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Kevin Durso, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.